We're going to have a briefing on this quote-unquote chairman's mark, which is intended to be a departure point for discussion, a framework for discussion. You know, you get the whole thing. We're going to review that, and then we're going to go around the room and take the individual reactions of the commissioners. Becky is going to help us describe, kind of constituted the issues that are being kind of coalesced and presented so we can keep track of them. We'll have some discussion of amendments as they emerge, but the long and short of it is, we'll then adjourn the meeting and come back on January 17th, having shared all the amendments that the commissioners have proposed, including amendments that commissioners proposed during this interim period, which we asked you to get to the team who can then circulate them to the members. So does that all make sense to everyone? Okay. And we're still waiting for Nick?
He can hear us right now. I'm just getting it on there.
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me? Can y'all hear me? Good.
So as we go through this review of this chairman's mark, I just want to make a couple of points about it. Not only that it's intended as a point of introduction and a framework, but a couple of the themes that we're trying to achieve here. All of them can be debated. Well, some of them I don't think will be debated, but some of them will. One, a big one, revenue neutrality. I'll even back up. We want our recommendations to be favorably considered. I'll back up even further. I think it's better for us to have a consensus report from the commission than not. I think it's better than not for us to have our recommendations actually adopted by decision makers in the Wilson building. Building on those two, it may be more likely than not to have them considered if we achieve revenue neutrality. We've also proposed revenue neutrality because from the very beginning, I've been instructed to stay out of the legislative realm and to keep to our knitting as a tax commission. So we're neither proposing budget cuts to the council or budget increases. Again, that's what's behind that. The other principles we're trying to achieve here are simplicity, right? Part of our mandate is to achieve efficiency and simplicity in the system. Achieve competitiveness by offsets to the business activity tax, reducing important irritants and taxes on the business community, and very importantly, and lastly, there's a counterbalance to that, to make significant investment in families in DC, working class poor families in DC. So that I'll say that by way of introduction, and I'll now turn it over for a more fulsome explanation. I don't know where my voice went. More fulsome explanation of the proposal. Who's going to do that? Nick?
Yep. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Good. I don't really have much more to say in the way of introduction. I'm really sorry I can't be with you all this afternoon. Richard is going to walk you through the actual recommendations in the report. And then I'm going to come back and say a few words about what's not in the report and kind of how to think about it overall. You know, you're not going to hear us talk about our views on the pros and cons of different provisions. That's really, I think today, you've heard in the fall, our take on the pros and cons of different aspects. Today is time for you all to start sharing your thoughts about pros and cons of different provisions. And as Mayor Williams said, we're looking forward to cataloging those and coming and taking them away and coming back next week for further discussion. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Richard. Richard's going to go through it all and stop periodically to take clarifying questions, but I would encourage you, if you have opinions on the different proposals or you want to talk about alternatives, to hold off on those until after he and I have walked all the way through the provisions. And then lastly, before we get into the discussion, I'm going to say just a few words about implementation. and give Glenn an opportunity to say a couple words on that point as well. So without further ado, any clarifying questions before Richard begins? All right, take it away.
Excellent. So everyone should have the chairman's mark, and on the third page, I'm going to run through these. Basically, I'm going to pause every time we get to a different section or a different subsection to allow you to ask questions to ensure that you are absolutely certain about the policy. As Nick said, if you have very strong opinions about a policy, pro or con, please pocket those until we've gone through all the proposals so we can have a comprehensive conversation with everyone. But I'm going to just try to describe them briefly and then take a minute to ensure that everyone's on the same page about what we're proposing. So this begins with proposals that advance economic competitiveness, entrepreneurship, and job creation. The first one is repealing the personal property tax. This is a tax levied on businesses' tangible property located in DC, such as asked to pay to do business in the district. Repeal the unincorporated business franchise tax. This is an idiosyncratic tax in the district because the district cannot tax the income of non-residents, and so there is a separate UBI tax on some businesses that reflect income but do not pay the corporate franchise tax. So I'll pause here for any clarifying questions. There's also apparently some audio problems. We're going to work on that, but we're going to deal with people in the room first. Okay. Other competitive policies. Reduce commercial property tax rates by 10 cents. Reminder, there are currently 3 business corporate commercial property tax rates. So currently those rates are for property that's less than $5 million. It's 1.65 per 100. For a property that's valued between $5 million and $10 million. 1.77 per 100, and for those valued above 10 million, it's 1.89 per 100. So all 3 rates would be reduced by 10 cents, dropping them to $1.55, $1.67, $1.79. End denial of occupation and business licenses for non-DMV clean hands debt up to $2,000. This is an issue where if you have outstanding payments, you cannot get a business license. This would increase the amount, I think, from $100 to $2,000. So it is all of this is a part, as Mary Williams laid out, of a balanced package. And so as we'll get to later, the biggest paid for is the business activity tax. And that kind of gave us an amount of money to play with. And then decisions were made to allocate different tax reductions that then fit into that. And so once we had done some objectives like repeal personal property and UBI, the money left over allowed for 10 cents. And we'll get to this later, but if you made the VAT higher, you could do more business tax cutting. If you made the VAT lower, you would not be able to do as much business tax cutting.
Question in the same vein, Sean. So the 10 cents and the 94 million, did we look at targeting that in any way? I very much support the concept and the amount. I just wonder, you mentioned 3 categories. It's 10 cents across all categories. Did we look at whether or not one category might be strategically benefit from a larger proportion of another?
Higher income people still get a tax cut. Because DC created these cliffs, if you dole them out differently, you would be doling out tax cuts to specific property owners. So one part of this rule would get rid of that cliff. So if you got rid of the cliff and you could possibly push more, you would still benefit all property. You would also have to get rid of the cliff as part of the rule.
And also because of the commercial office property, we call it $1.1 billion for commercial office and then 200 million more from other types of corporate development. So it's larger than commercial office property.
Excellent. The last one in this bucket. That's fine. Expected values for estimates for the first one in fiscal year 2025, assuming property values of what I think will be in 2025. Then the final proposal in this bucket is enact the SALT cap workaround. This is inherently a complex proposal, but essentially there is a cap on the state and local tax deduction if you file as an individual. If you file as a business, there is no cap. This provision would allow district residents to choose to file basically as a business to avoid the SALT cap workaround. You get into the full detail, there's no way I can summarize it, unfortunately, better than that. Yes. Right. No, we would still have to have some type of business income or less. So only, yes. If you're a wage earner, you're still going to be subject to the cap, which might go away in 2 years. Anything else on business tax reductions? Okay. The next batch of proposals are support families and make the tax system more progressive and racially equitable. First is enact a $1,000 child tax credit. So that's a credit for every eligible child in your household. And it would be available to households with incomes up to $200,000 if they're married, or $150,000 if they are single. After that, it would be phased out at a relatively low rate. It would get the credit into those earning roughly $300,000, $400,000-ish. And there would also be an option to deposit the savings that came with that credit into an opportunity savings account. Number 8, indexed income tax brackets for inflation beginning in 2025. So currently the brackets of income on the income tax are fixed. They never move. However, we could index to them to inflation so that they would go up along with inflation. Under the current system, if your wages go up with inflation, you might end up paying more just because you're earning more, just because you're earning along with inflation. Because we prevent that and basically provide a tax cut to all DC workers with taxable income.
Is it safe to assume that the fiscal impact of that would grow subsequent years each year?
Yes, and so like in parentheses, it notes that in 2028 it would be 9 million. Okay. Yes. But it would vary. If it didn't, then it would be far lower. We would never know. Double the child dependent care tax credit. DC has a lot of child care policies. This is specifically the child care tax credit that you get both on your federal return and on your district return. Currently, you get that on your federal return. You're allowed to take 32% of it on your district return. So this would double it to 64%. So this would only go to families who are paying for child care and then getting the credit on their federal return. Number 10, make seniors and young adults eligible for the childless worker earned income tax credit. At the federal level, the EITC, if you do not have children on your return, is limited to filers ages 25 to 64. It's basically get rid of that restriction. And so if you are working in the district and you have eligible income and you meet the requirements, you get the EITC regardless of your age. So currently, if you are 65 years old, if you're working full time and you earn $20,000, you're denied the credit. So let's say you just make $20,000. If you make $20,000 when you're age 64 and $20,000 when you're age 65, when you're age 64, get the earned income tax credit. When you turn 65, they take it away from you. And this would just say that is no longer a requirement. As long as you are earning that income, you get the credit if you qualify. Yes, earned income has to be wage income. There are other limits in the EITC regarding investment income. You could trigger those and therefore not become eligible. But if you are otherwise eligible, the age cannot be the reason why you lose the credit if this was enacted. Eliminate the EITC marriage penalty. Currently in the district, if you do not have children on your return, you can get that credit up to roughly $25,000. However, if that's for single and married. So if you envision a couple, they are both earning $20,000 and they are not married, they both currently get the credit. When they get married, they then lose it. Or if it's even someone who has $25,000 and someone has $5,000, once they combine, they lose the credit. This would just double the parameters so that it would be something like $25,000 roughly speaking and $50,000 roughly speaking for the credit. So therefore, one would be for singles and one would be for married couples. Allow EIT recipients to receive their refund as an annual lump sum payment rather than monthly payments. Recently, the district made it so that if you get a large enough EITC from the district, you get a portion of it in monthly payments. This would simply give the filer the option to say, yes, I like the idea of monthly payments, I'd like to do that, or no, I do not want monthly payments, I would like to receive my whole EITC refund instantaneously. Convert income tax deductions for 529 educational savings plans to a credit. 529 is a federal program. There's a host of issues about making savings and then making payments for education. Separately, the district has a deduction for those contributions. This would change that deduction to a credit. That would help low-income residents who currently cannot benefit from the deduction. Yes, from the deduction. They don't have the taxable income. But it also would probably lower the amount of tax savings from some of the highest ranked folks that are currently benefiting from the deduction. But they would still be available to get the credit. The credit would be capped at a certain amount. Yes.
Some places, available now.
Or
Not limited.
in addition, yes. 4,000 for singles, 8,000 for joint filers. And then this would just change this into a credit for everyone. Again, there's some math involved. There are some winners and losers. That would basically mean that low-income residents who currently get nothing from it would get something, but some high-income earners would get less tax benefit than they're currently getting. They would still get some. No one would get nothing. Increase the deduction for public school teachers' expenses. Currently, have the amount in my head, but if you're a public school teacher and if you pay for school supplies yourself, you can get a small amount of that deducted off tax return, just increase that amount. Pause again, any clarifying questions on any of those policies? All right. Property tax. Okay. Currently, the district has a couple of policies aimed at making or assisting low-income, middle-income, and seniors who make property tax payments. This would combine a lot of those policies into a newer, hopefully simpler, and more generous policy. So it would extend the eligibility of homeowners up to $100,000 in income and renters to $85,000. Currently, those limits are based on age, and it's something like 55 something if you're under 65 and 70 something if you're over. This would get rid of that age component and just go with homeowners and renters. It would also increase the amount of the credit to $2,500 for homeowners, $1,500 for renters. And then, as a part of these changes, it would cap the senior homestead deduction at $25,000 and allow homeowners to claim the credit via the property tax. So this is all, these are all the tax credits, no offset. All plans. There's other offsetting points later on.
So, I was just going to say, explain to me the why.
So, no, yeah, please. What we're seeing in 15, again, there's a lot in here where there's like matching policies that are not right next to each other. But this is about making it simpler and more generous. So everything described in this number 15 is just making it available to more people. There's one small change in that currently those income limits where you can get the credit or not are based on your age. And this would get rid of that and change it to whether you're a homeowner or if you're a renter. But both are higher. And so no one is missing out because we're raising those and we're raising the amount of credit that people could get. There are some offsets later, but all of this is tax relief for people who have no property taxes.
What's the spread there? No, I just, so you're, right now it's subject to an age requirement. So a 30-year-old making $99,000 a year is going to be eligible for this break.
If they own a home.
Right.
They were eligible before, but at a lower income level. There was an income level for seniors and one for people who are not seniors, who own homes.
I'm just trying to understand what this means practically.
So my understanding of this is that now we have taken away the difference in income eligibility level based on age. But
So
both
how
people
much
who
of
were
the tax
seniors
rate?
and non-seniors were eligible before.
So currently, the income limits are $57,600 if you are younger than age 70, and $78,600 if you are above age 70. However,
What does this break mean?
well, an important part of the component that I did not describe is this is not simply, you do not get this simply by having income below that. Your property tax payment or your rent, which is a formula based on how much of that is property taxes, must be a certain proportion of your income in order to be eligible for this credit. So it is hypothetically possible that a young person with like $90,000 in income or owning a home could get it, but they would also have to meet the other requirements that say that what they're paying in property tax is a share of their income. And so a lot of them would not get it because they're not meeting that other qualification.
Let's just talk about the market. A lot of people who live there for a long time, and perhaps their home values have increased. And so instead of saying, well, I can't afford my taxes anymore on my house, you now have to, because the taxes are now have gone up so much. This is the circuit breaker there, so that we don't displace.
In fact, it's called a circuit breaker because the analogy is like, instead of letting like the electricity overrun your household, letting your property tax overrun your household.
So it's not because someone just wants to buy a house and now
No.
okay.
And then, again, like I apologize because I'm not summarizing it very well with my words, but there is a mathematical formula where you have to plug in your income and you have to plug in what you're paying in property tax. And only if that percentage is above a certain amount do you get this.
Yeah, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I feel like it's really important in neighborhoods that are really shifting. I think that the people who live in those neighborhoods should be generationally, it's really important that communities can stay. And, yeah, so I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I like what you're saying.
Just a question, isn't it at odds with though this split value system that's being proposed? My concern about split value is that as soon as you build a metro station or an amenity, the underlying value of the property goes up. And so, everyone who's jumped on this land value split, wasn't around when Columbia Heights was hit by the gentrification wave, where the underlying value of the land because of public investment skyrockets. And so you get to a situation where your tax system, your two-tier tax system, is disconnected from one, the value of your house, or two, community stability. In other words, I could have a house next to the Columbia Heights metro station where the underlying land value has tripled. The amenity on top of it may have stayed the same. But I'm paying follows public investment. So if we are trying to create circuit breakers, imperfect as they are, the issue is whether or not these circuit breakers are going to counteract a split rate system that starts to accelerate the underlying value of the land because of public investment. That's it.
And ask that we not wade into opinions about the proposal just yet, although valuable, and we'll get to there, if everyone has a chance to talk about that. Just for clarity, the last clarifying statement, if the program exists, this would make it a little bigger.
Question on item. What's the, how do I think about the capping of the senior home credit? Well, capping is 2,500. What's the impact of that relative to what's
That, Mike, do you know that one? I wasn't an expert on this one. Okay, I apologize. Here's why this is confusing. I apologize. 1 second. This is because we are going to, there is a proposal later to change the current 50% property tax credit for seniors. So currently, if you're a senior and if you meet income qualifications, you can cut your property tax payment in half. This would make changes to that, and one of the changes would be capping that part. So apologies, but there's a couple of forms moving here. One of them would be changing something that currently helps seniors. It can possibly give very large benefits to wealthy households, because there's to go to various kind of home, for example. And so this would cap it, meaning that you would still be eligible for it, but you couldn't get $5,000, $10,000 in tax relief simply as a result of having a very high value home. This is the cap. It's increasing the cap. So it's increasing the 2,500 and increasing the cap from what is that?
Yeah, okay. Richard, I don't think it was an opinion, it was really a statement. Going back to my example of Columbia Heights, because I remember when Columbia Heights was hit with a gentrification wave. As soon as there was a massive investment, public investment in the metro station, and the neighborhood started to change, the value, the underlying land value is obviously going to be different. And so if I had a house that's next to Columbia Heights Metro that was pre-metro was 500,000, equally split between the land and the improvement. Now all of a sudden, that $500 million property is worth $1 million because of the underlying land value. My concern is that maybe we'll be taxed that way. My concern is that we're going to have a system where we're going to have a tax bill that is unrelated to what the house actually is worth, because we will have juiced up the land value.
It's also the kind of a cost line here for split value.
Why don't we get through all of them before that? Can we do this? Why don't we just go through them all and then we can have debates over the different provisions?
I'm sorry, just
I know, but
for
we-
clarification. And I'm looking at number 4, where it says move to the split rate value system.
For commercial.
It doesn't say commercial.
It's supposed to.
Before the semicolon is done.
It's all that.
It's a typo. That's not an apology.
Let's keep on going.
Okay. Number 16. Increase from 30 days to 60 days the period to pay automated traffic enforcement tickets before fines come. It wouldn't change the fines, but it would just change the amount of time a resident has to pay it before it comes. I don't have that in fact. We'll jump back to it. No. Do not eliminate. But currently, the fine doubles after 30 days. Now the fine would double after 60 days. We could put forward amendments later. Yes, yes, that's an amendment you can put forward. Number 7.
My grandfather's most expensive camp. I didn't know that these cameras.
Number 17, reduce to 0% the deed recordation tax for qualified first-time homeowners. Currently, so everyone pays a tax when they buy a home. Currently, there's a lower rate for a first-time, this would make it 0. I believe. Let me come back to it. I'm sorry. And enhance the deferral property tax system for seniors. That is, yeah, I think you can push back what you owe and make the payments when the house is sold. And so this would allow more people to take advantage of it. I believe currently, if you meet requirements, you can defer your property tax payments as a homeowner until the house is later sold. At which time, when the sale goes through, you would then pay those previous tax payments that you deferred. I think it's a program mostly for seniors who are on limited income, who might not be able to afford their payments. But so therefore, when the sale is made, they can then make up for it, knowing that there's value in the home without putting pressure on them. And so this would strengthen the program and allow more people to take advantage of it. Perfect.
You have a question for him, just ask away loudly.
Send it via pigeon. All right. Broaden, rebalance, and modernize the tax rates. Tax electric vehicles at the same rate as other cars and trucks. I would just remove the exemption that currently exists that prevents them from paying sales tax. Number 20, limit income tax exemptions for municipal bond interest to bonds issued by DC, so that they tax other state bonds.
Do we know what the estimate would be? Because we always run in the buzzsaw with this. Do we know what the estimate would be if we just grandfathered in everybody who already has these bonds and just said going forward, we're going to?
I do not have that.
So right, if I'm coming newer, if my family's coming newer in the market, I know I can't do this. I've never done a state. If I already have it, I can let them roll out.
And the tax share is only,
Something to get an estimate of.
it's only $3 million in general, so it can't be very much.
Everybody else do this.
You can. So this particular thing is unique to DC with terms of other state bonds, but what the mayor is describing about putting a date on something is common and not particularly common. I don't get on the plan, but I think that could be pretty simple if you said as of this date. No, number 20, sorry, no, number 20. The exemption for municipal bonds.
I think Tony's approach makes the most sense. I think it's fair to everyone. No subtle expectations going forward. Yes.
21. Apply a 10% assessment cap to all homestead properties, regardless of the owner's age, by eliminating special 2% seniors cap. So currently, if you're over a certain age, the value of your home, the taxable value of your home, cannot increase by more than 2%. This goes back to the number 15, where we're increasing tax relief for seniors. We're making more people available for tax relief, but in a trade, we are getting rid of this current form, or we're mitigating this current form of tax relief for seniors. But with number 22, yes.
Is there a way to see how the senior benefit, the senior tax changes impact? Like we have things that are increasing the ability for seniors to get tax relief, and then you have this, which eliminates the cap, but how do we compare the impact of one versus the other? I don't know what this actually does.
I was talking with, we had a similar concern from one of the council members. So we just got a map for how the 2% cap impacts different people in different wards. Now we're kind of on top of the schedule increase.
That'd be helpful. More, higher, saying. More, but I don't know how to.
Yeah.
It'll probably vary by income level, but I think 22 would be more relief to folks who actually need it and not.
I'm like,
Assume everybody-
my band.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole. Number 22, eliminate income tax inclusion for survivors benefits. Number 3, I got nothing on this one. Yeah, I got nothing. Maybe you can say more about this one. But
That's almost like answer 20.
22. I got no one. I got nothing. Oh yeah, Nixon. Let's go, man.
You guys waving at me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, so sorry, can someone say the question really clearly towards the mic?
Can you remind everybody what number 22, eliminate income tax for survivors benefits?
Audio's really not great for Erica. Can Richard say it? No, I don't know your audio. I got it. Sorry, everybody. Your audio went out entirely for a few last few minutes. So right now, generally, DC follows federal law on how we treat retirement income, but unlike the one of the few exceptions is that, unlike on your federal return, if you have pension survivor benefits from either the DC government or federal government, if you're 62 and older, that's tax exempt. I don't really know the history of this. I think it was sort of left over from some other cleaning up period. But generally, the idea here is to increase horizontal equity by treating all forms of retirement income similarly.
I suppose there's really no practical way of grandfathering in people who currently benefit going forward, is there?
I'm not
You
sure.
couldn't have a split rate in the future, if you will, right?
I think we should look into that. Is there a way to begin applying this to people who are 61? Of course,
Right.
and if you're 61 in this situation, so that all the people currently getting the tax benefit are not changed. That won't be simple, but after hearing this, I think that's something that we should look into. Yeah,
Couldn't there be few, though this is for district?
and federal.
For the federal side, I'm more concerned about the impact on district workers, but I appreciate the distinction. For district workers, it's the post-87 system, right? You have to be retired before or have earned your service before. So that's a small group. But the continuing group would be the teachers, firefighters, and police officers who
Yes.
retire, including those who die in the line of duty, first responders.
Yep.
And this is a question, not a statement. I just want to make sure that, we don't get cross purposes with the first responders for people who die in the line of duty. You could always narrow it, which would make it a pain in the behind to administer. But I would be careful that we don't burden people who died in the line of duty.
Absolutely.
So let's see how we can think about this. So,
The district currently tax social security benefit.
A portion of that. It's the same as the federal government. So if the same income is eligible. No?
We exempt Social Security benefits. Sorry, your audio went out. Your DC exempts Social Security benefits.
Couple from federal tax rates for non-qualified small businesses, stock payoff. Limited 24 year, a limited tax rate for incomplete non-grantors from federal. To be honest, I do not know what these are. Broad and upbeat taxes on business entities, 25. Business activity taxes. A low rate, broad-based, value-added tax on gross receipts minus the sum of purchases from other businesses, rent, and capital expenditure. I don't know. This one, the specifics I can look up, but off the top of my head, really wealthy people trust that with some that are not taxed, that's the avoid taxes.
Sorry, you want me to go ahead and explain to do 23 and 24? Okay, sorry. So proposal 23 is essentially there's a federal capital gains tax break for certain kinds of stock that have accumulated. Typically, this is after an IPO, some stock increases dramatically in value. There's a certain federal break called the qualified small business stock. It's not really small businesses because it's up to $50 million. DC has historically just piggybacked on that as part of piggybacking on the federal tax code, but it doesn't really have anything to do with businesses that are located in DC. It's if the investor has DC tax liability, but it could be for an investment anywhere in the country. So a number of other states have decoupled from this as it has become a little bit more common and a little bit more costly. So that's what number 23 is. Number 24, similarly, there's a pretty complicated tax break by which trusts are set up in such a way that they cross state lines. They're still subject to federal tax, but there's a way to structure them in such a way that the trusts avoid state taxes. So some states are looking at it. I think California and New York have taken steps to eliminate the ability of trusts to be set up in this way. Essentially, you're just closing a tax loophole that some investment advisors have created. And these are written up in more detail in the original proposal write-ups that we circulated way back when. We can recirculate those.
So you're able to set up trusts that are extraterritorial? I'll ask it later.
Yeah, you can create a trust in the state without income, basically.
So basically,
Wait a minute,
I didn't know that.
some other time with a non-guarantor trust. But my understanding is you always have a guarantor.
Tell Nick we're gonna dig in offline with him more on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also 23.
And 23, okay.
Yep, thank you. Okay, moving on. Broaden and update taxes on business entities and consumption. Number 25, big one, create a business activity tax. This is a low-rate, broad-based, value-added tax on a business's gross receipts minus the sum of purchases from other businesses' rent and capital expenditures. This tax would be credited against the DC corporate franchise tax and individual income tax. The point of this tax, the reason it's on here, I would point you to the nice, very comprehensive memo Nick typed up, and specifically the tables in the back, which help show you, broadly speaking, what different types of businesses pay in the District of Columbia. And the big one, the one that got my attention, is if you look at is example C, large partnership. Partnerships oftentimes do not pay the business franchise tax or the UBI. There's a lot of them who earn a lot of money who are not contributing to the district's tax base. If we enacted a BAT and then enacted some of the other tax relief we're proposing, such as eliminating the personal property tax, reducing commercial property tax revenue, getting rid of the fees, getting rid of the UBI, there would, of course, be some winners and losers. There would be changes for many things, but the biggest thing would be that a lot of these large businesses that currently do not pay a business franchise tax would start paying the BAT, and that would shift and expand the tax base in the District of Columbia. Currently, in the MARC, the rate is set at 1.4, and that produces $275 million, which, going back to your question, was the basis for a lot of the tax relief. If you turn that knob up and you made it higher, you could provide even more types of business tax relief. If you turned it down, it would be a smaller burden for the businesses now paying it, but it would mean less tax relief that we outlined at the beginning of the MARC.
Can we have a discussion now or come back to it?
And could I just ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't this as it's designed here in general, including like up in New Hampshire, doesn't this discriminate against a business that has a high payroll in the way that gross receipts, if it's left unattended, discriminates against a grocery store?
Nick was supposed to do a deep dive for everyone.
It includes,
You know what I'm saying? Because the offsets don't cover it anyway.
so there are a number of ways this can go, depending on the structure of the firm. We are not excluding payroll, obviously, but we're also not excluding profits, capital gains, and things like this. So it will also shift tax burdens to more profitable companies. The net effect of that is, it's hard to say.
But I don't know if that's true. Go ahead.
Couple clarifying questions. On the ability to implement the tax, for the kinds of examples that we've talked about, large partnerships, which could be like a law firm or something,
Right.
if you just don't work here, then that if I change my location of work, if I have the flexibility to do that, doesn't that change the
Yeah, that's a
ability
good
to?
concern, but Virginia has a very high bat as well. So let's say a law firm decides because of this to move to Virginia, they'll have to pay a business activity tax.
He's talking about working, not the business. He's talking about working there.
This is
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
not a lawyer, this is complicated, but the nexus would be economic activity. So if you think of like the lobbyist firms that are in DC, they have to do stuff in DC. They would have to trigger it, even if every employee was in Virginia and they crossed the river to work. I don't want to mean that that's like for everything, but it would be based on their economic activity.
How do you capture? How do you
This,
capture?
any kind of sales or any kind of business being done.
But how do you capture that? How does he capture what that is?
That's a good question for him.
So we have a model, I'm sorry for interrupting. We have a model as it relates to unemployment insurance, where people work in multiple jurisdictions, all right? And this is what happens in practice. We have, three UI systems that are constantly changing with different rates and different reporting requirements. And so if you are, say, a construction company and you're working in all of these, there's a formula that is not perfect, that provides no real clarity about where you are primarily domiciled, that worker, because it can change from one minute to the next. Then you get into the issue where you are required to remit the entire UI for that, say that worker made $100,000 and worked equally in the three. You're required to remit the UI on the $100,000 in the district, even though you paid your amount in Maryland, even though you paid your amount in Virginia. So then once you have to pay the district for the UI for 100, then you get the privilege of battling with the district to reconcile that. And what happens is it takes 2 years to reconcile, if you're lucky, if you have the staff and the patience to do it. While you are battling that, you get the added benefit of having unclean hands, which means your business license expires, which means you can't compete for government contracts, and it cascades on down the line. All right, so I think, Rashawn, if I understand your point, is what happens, and look, I'm all for the underlying laudable purpose, but what happens if we're trying to burden people at my former law firm, Greenberg Trowing, that has an office here, but also has an office in Northern Virginia, and their partners just say, screw it, we don't come in anyway. So you're not going to take 100% of my wages if I'm only coming in 20% of the time. Then that creates a cascading problem, and I don't know how you figure that out.
I have a different understanding of this proposal, and this is a really helpful example, so thank you for sharing that. The way I understand this proposal, which is totally wrong, is that we're shifting an individual level tax, right? So right now partners' income is taxed at the individual level, so if you live in Virginia, you can take your income and it's taxed in Virginia. We're making that an entity level tax. So it's not partners paying, it's the entity, that partnership that's paying.
And the entity, I'm sorry for interrupting, but the workers can simply say, we're not working out of that office anymore. You see what I mean? We're going to work out of the Northern Virginia office, or we're going to figure out a way to game it. And there is no way, you can actually get down granular on a construction worker. There's sites, time, and attendance stuff. You don't have that with
But you'd still have to have an entity in Virginia to be able to do that, no? This is where I have the disconnect.
Yes.
So,
Yes. You do.
So my sort of clarifying question is the ability to administer this tax, how you can capture economic activity based on this formula to be able to apply it to, the profits, the dollar amount that to be applied to that yields a $275 million revenue estimate in the model that we're using.
Right.
My second question is the $200,000 threshold for which this wouldn't apply. Where did 200 come from, and how do we think about that amount relative to inducing new business, new starts? Is that like the right? I don't know how to think about that threshold, right? Because we don't want to. I mean, we've had a lot of conversation over and I don't want to debate the issue. I'm just trying to. So I'm gonna say that I just want to understand those 2 points to help me understand whether or not this is workable and workable policy.
Do you want me to speak to those? The on the first point about, so we already, the corporate franchise tax and the unincorporated business tax already use a set of rules called apportionment rules, about which get into how do you apportion, in that case, income to different jurisdictions. The district uses something called single sales factor rules and market-based apportionment, which basically means that where the service is delivered to is where it is taxed. And so you would simply transport those rules over to the new tax. I say it as if it's super simple. And Glenn can speak more to some actual work that is need to go in to flesh out exactly how these rules work. But it's, in the world of business taxation, it's actually a pretty straightforward exercise. Not saying that nobody can game it. Certainly games are played, but it is actually less subject to gaming than an income tax. And now I've totally blanked on what the second. Oh, where the 200,000 came from. Honestly, we pretty much cribbed that from the New Hampshire tax that to some extent was a partial model for this. I think you're right that we could think a little more, we could give some more thought to what is the right level. I don't think there's a magic number there. One thing I would note is it's not like it's $200,000 and then if you earn $201,000, you're paying tax on everything. It's $200,000 exemption for all levels of businesses. So even businesses with gross receipts somewhat over $200,000 benefit from that exemption.
These apportionment rules are pre-pandemic, pre-work from home. And if I'm working at Greenbrook Valley, which I did, and my clients are outside of the city, they're national and international clients, and I provide that work from my home in Virginia or Maryland, and I'm simply reassigned to my Virginia office. And it doesn't matter. I can work anywhere. What confidence, number one, do you have that you're going to be able to go down to the granular level and figure out where those dollars were earned, and then you're going to be able to account for that?
Well, so let's back up a little bit. Typically in corporate tax, it's domestic. Let's not throw international terms in, but just domestic terms. There's really three things that are important to figuring out how to distribute income that's subject to each jurisdiction's tax. It's typically the share of property that's owned by the firm, if it's relevant, the share of sales by jurisdiction the firm receives, and then finally payroll, which is the question you're asking. Where are your people actually sitting? In the district, we tend to favor just focusing on where the sales occur, which can get very complicated because if you're selling to a multi-jurisdiction firm, then it becomes ever more complicated. But the notion is, where is the address that you're delivering the service to, whatever that is.
Like who did you bill?
Yeah, well, more than just who.
Well, where
where is your customer doing their work such they receive your benefit?
Okay.
And so, in some cases, around legal services, if the service is defending people in court, where the courthouse is, so what they may have an office outside of the jurisdiction, but if you're the jurisdiction where the court is, it's my prior experience, that's where the sale is. So broaden that to many different scenarios, but that's the way you think about it, is where does that benefit received by your customer?
Don't you apportion though, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but let's say that lawsuit cost $1 million.
Right.
You get to apportion how much of it happened in the district. In other words, a lot of that work could have happened, prep work could have been outside, and you report a fraction of the amount. But actually, the attorney time spent in the district, not the prep clinical work before.
So that's a good point. And it's a good point because I omitted the fact that these three factors can vary depending on jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions can be very heavily weighted to where your sales is. Others can evenly say, well, let's look at all your property across the country, all of your payroll and your sales, and then have a formula that allocates the, based on a weighted average of those three factors. And to the extent we lean heavily on the single factor sales, where is the market that you're actually providing the service, then the allocation of where your workers are is less important.
What is
so-
this revenue estimate based on? What is its assumption? based
What our current practice is and
From the corporate?
yeah, from the
the
corporate,
franchise
yeah, the current practice.
Which is,
Well, it tends to lean much heavier on where the benefit or where the client is accepting the service. Right.
is that to say the other factors count? So you have a weighted way to look at this, or?
DC is a single sales factor jurisdiction. That's actually one of the things that the 2013 Tax Tourism Commission recommended, I believe, Richard, was going to single sales factor. So the other factors, which are often common in corporate tax apportionment, don't apply for purposes of DC business taxes.
What is Virginia?
It looks like, so Virginia, this is my cable, they are either sales, the same as DC, or what's called double weighted sales, which is the same, the three factors that Glenn is talking about, but sales count more.
Twice as much.
Yeah.
Right.
And Maryland is also sales. In general, most places have moved to sales. But it really had to do with some of the things Dave was talking about, where like they didn't want to get punished for bringing in jobs in factories and having that increase their tax bill. So they've seen sales, but now it's having these other effects. We're expecting apportionment.
So Maryland has a business activity?
No, but so the apportionment factor is the same for the commercial, the corporate income tax as it would be for this, yes.
All I'm saying is it's just not easy.
I want to get to just not easy. I have another point on just not easy. So by the design and the application of the tax, if you take next chart, here you have a class of people who aren't paying. If you now impose this tax on the firm, the partners who live in DC can offset what they're otherwise paying to DC, and they're not exposed to the tax. It's only the people who aren't who really will be paying the new tax. I think we will, if this were to proceed, we really have to get, and I've heard this from Steve Conso in DC, we really would have to get a legal opinion as to whether this pass muster on the commuter tax, because essentially you have a class of people who call themselves a partnership who are being taxed, and you can't do that. I mean, I'm not
At the individual
against
level,
it.
but I think the point here is we're
The
shifting.
point is that even if aggregated, it's still a commuter tax. That's the argument, and we need to make sure we can.
Especially if this is gonna be applied to a bunch of law firms.
One last question. This isn't the bulk of the advocacy, it's an honest question, whether or not we have discounted on, it's one thing to collect money from people who have a profit. It's another to collect money from entities that are not making a profit. So let's assume we hit a recession. Let's assume these increased borrowing costs are squeezing people's margins. Let's assume that it starts at a small level and works its way up to the higher food chain level. Have we discounted the revenue we will collect because there is no money? In other words, the hair salon has no money to pay, the 1.4%. And before people scoff, you know, I'd invite you to stand in the shoes of people who are in businesses who make no money. And that happens. It happens in recessions. Our vulnerable commercial corridors have the thinnest margins. Are we discounted? The question is, have we discounted this for the money we will not collect?
Have we taken in a specific hypothetical? I can't say. You know, and that's, I understand your point, but we also have a corporate profits tax right now. So we have some experience understanding.
And that's a profit.
Now, I understand what you're saying, and, you know, this is exceptionally difficult to estimate. And we'll talk a little more, I think, about.
Can I give you just quickly an anatomy of what it looks like when you don't make a profit? Who gets paid first? All right, you pay your people first.
No, I think that's, if you to get information along those lines for low margin, non-margin businesses? How it's like we know from gross receipts, and how's it hitting them?
Right, and having administered a gross receipts tax, that was a common complaint. But the obligation was what it was, and it was paid.
On businesses that make more than $5 million a year, right?
No.
Are you talking about?
Much higher than that.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry, yeah. Because we have one now, essentially, we have the ballpark fee, which is essentially a gross receipts tax.
Yeah, that's,
A business, it's essentially the same, it's a tax whether you make money or not, they're just larger.
That's
Right.
more businesses in terms of what you're
Yeah.
talking about it. More businesses in terms of what you're talking about.
I just wanted to highlight the impact on business owners who find themselves in this situation, because there is a hierarchy of what gets paid first. You pay your staff, your workers, you pay your suppliers, you do those things, and then other things start to slip. Your FICA taxes start to slip, your property taxes start to slip, but then you're left with having to pay the 1.4%. Where does that fit in? And so eventually you squeeze them until they're out of work, the jobs disappear, the services are no longer provided. And for what?
Okay, other questions that are clarifying questions, we can have a debate on the different.
Would apply to any business operating, that wouldn't be, now there would be the exemption for small, there's the things Mayor Williams talked about, like if you're a DC resident, you credit the tax payment on your personal income taxes, but there would be no discrimination or selection based on new or old. Okay, almost there. Number 29, increase the itemized deduction phase out. Currently, don't have this number off the top of my head, but currently if you earn above a certain amount of money, your itemized deductions are phased out at a 5% rate. So it increased the rate to 7.5, and so basically the phase out was quicker, and so you would lose your item deductions faster as you earn more income above a certain threshold. Apologies, I don't have that at my fingertips. Oh, we did. Thank you, Michael. I was so excited. So let's go back to 26. Oh, God. Apply method of applying corporate franchise tax to complex multi-state corporations Finnegan rule. It has to do with businesses that operate everywhere and how you measure their tax base. We moved from Joyce to Finnegan. It sounds like an Irish bar, haha. I really encourage you to look more. I just do not have the ability to answer those off the top of my head. But it has to do with corporate payers. Number 27, create a data excise tax.
Repeat that, man.
Yeah, this is important. I just think this is important.
So,
We're trying to incentivize businesses
it is,
to stay in the city.
it does, but it only applies to businesses that are operating across the world.
Across the world or across the country?
World, I believe.
There's multi-state.
Maybe it's apologies.
Yeah, this isn't the worldwide.
No, okay, so it's, yeah, so just multiple.
Most states are moving to this method of posting corporate profits, so it's kind of like an update to this method.
When it goes to business activity in the state and takes profit.
Yeah.
Okay, so Finnegan treats the entire corporate group as a single taxpayer. Only C corporations are subject to combined reporting and therefore affected by the switch to Finnegan method. C corporations tend to be much larger than others. Choice is combined reporting. The Joyce method requires DCs to establish taxing jurisdictions separately over every member of a corporate group. And so it's, essentially you would allow them to file individually or you force them to join all together. This goes back to, again, getting apportionment and figuring out how much sales are in the district versus the country versus other states. I apologize for being a little flip and being quick, but I'm just trying to cover quickly because you're right, this would affect important businesses that would be operating here in the other states.
Yeah, I think this is important.
Will we see you at Finnegan Bar after this is over?
Yeah.
That's gonna be at halftime. I don't know what you're talking about after. I can be quick. Okay. I apologize. If you'd like more, we absolutely can do a deeper dive and present you the type of detail that you would respect your questions.
We have 2 pages on every proposal that's in here that we have discussed and that have been shared with everyone. So they already are available, they're all on the website. They're there. Just take it.
Okay. Number 27, create a data excise tax on businesses that are extracting data from over 50,000 DC residents at a rate of $4 per participant per year. This was put in here after I went and got married, so I'm going to defer questions to Nick if he has time. I'll play that card once. Or we can.
Yeah, Jeremy, basically the idea here is that as we've got this new element in the economy, which is the use of where a data platform, a digital platform is made available to consumers in exchange for the use of their personal data. It's essentially a barter transaction, but it is not subject currently to tax. So this is a new tax. No other jurisdiction has a tax quite like this. It's modeled on a proposal that is under consideration in New York. Other jurisdictions are considering other ways of tackling this problem, but this particular model would be levied on the largest such platforms, those that have over, I think, 50,000 DC participants at a level of $4 per person per year. So think of it as it's sort of an excise tax on the collection of this personal data.
So the $4 was arbitrary, or working backwards, you sort of came up with that number?
Don't know what $4. Yeah. Assuming it's to keep it at a low rate.
So it's a minimum of $200,000 per company that's collecting data, right? Yeah.
Think of it as a sort of, I mean, I look at it and I basically, to me, this revenue is 0 initially because this will be litigated. It's a shift to the new economy,
Yes.
but it will be heavily litigated.
So this would be Instagram, Facebook,
Right.
any of these social media groups.
All the things you use that don't charge you when you use them, but are collecting their value and their economic activity by your participation in your data.
It's more subscription-based, like Netflix, Hulu, like that type of
It's
stuff.
like you're selling your data, and that should be taxed.
Do they sell data? I think it was more like,
Or better, I guess you're purchasing their, whatever it is you're offering, which I can't figure out.
Where's the number of 50,000?
No
We
idea
law
what you're
firms don't
buying.
need to work if we tax them, so.
Very good.
That's how we get them to stay.
Even that.
Okay, moving on to something far less controversial, residential property. I just read them. Increase residential property tax.
Hold on, Richard. Jim has
27.
Sir.
Where's the number 50,000 residents? As opposed to 200,000.
Nick, can you hear us?
Where's 50?
Go ahead.
Where's 50,000 come from?
So I was trying to capture that's a level that allows you to capture roughly the 10 or 12 biggest platforms in DC if you use national data and assume that DC residents are participating at the same level as DC residents. So it really is those few big platforms, your YouTubes, Googles, Facebook, and so on. And again, this is somewhat modeled on a New York legislation that in New York, I think it's a 1 million New York residents. So kind of the comparable figure for DC would be about 50,000. Again, there's nothing really magic about 50,000.
It does seem like a low number. Do we have a bunch of troglodytes in DC? I mean, it seems like there'd be more than 50,000 people in DC that are using social media.
Yeah, that's the threshold per platform. The biggest platforms have more, right? Is in the 102,000.
It's still low.
Anyway, we can probably like bifurcated where some is like everyone, some is very low, and so this avoids that.
Because I want them to sell my data.
Okay, we're not going through these non-controversial 28.
Yeah.
If that number is double, 100,000, 14 million.
No, because that would eliminate people who gather the
You
smallest
say
amount.
double the fee from 4 to 8. You'd have to
Still-
double the participant
yeah.
fee.
That's why I have to.
It doesn't matter, the revenue is
Yeah,
zero.
you could make it 8.
Yeah, you
double
make
the
it
amount.
more than 4.
Well,
That's
why
why I
am I
asked about the
Recommending
4.
anything that's just going
I
to
think
get
it's
litigation.
it's an experiment, so
Yeah.
it could be
It's
future.
litigated.
I should try to give us something.
Make it worth the candle.
Okay,
Yeah.
Number 28, increase residential property tax on high-value properties, both single-family and multifamily, by either A, increasing the residential property tax rate on the portion of property value in excess of $2 million to 1.04, is currently 0.85 for all property. And it would work like a marginal income tax where it is not that there's not a cliff where you would pay that rate. It would be just the value. So if you had a home that was $2.1 million, it would be that 100,000 that would be taxed at the higher rate. Or B, raising the rate from 85 cents per 100 to 95 cents per 100 on all property, but in combination, raising the homestead deduction from, is it currently 75,000 to 225,000?
I think it may be 85, but.
Yes.
all right. Now, there may be different, arguments against it, but there are any clarifying questions about it? Even if you don't like it, would you like clarified for you why you really don't like it? Or-
Actually, I have one
I just-
Clearly understand. I don't like it.
I don't like it. I'm gonna tell you, I think it was a political problem, possibly. If we cut real estate taxes, commercial real estate taxes, and increase residential taxes.
What was?
That is currently in the mark.
It's residential.
I didn't hear
Currently,
the
you
last
see,
part.
On a sliver of on a small number of properties.
Oh, right.
Agreed.
Yeah.
yes.
Conceptually, you cut in, commercial taxes.
And then
Property,
making
Yes.
home
increase it.
residential.
Yes.
Yeah. I agree.
The argument that you've made before is that for years, the commercial market being robust has in effect subsidized and helped keeping property rates low. And now this is kind of a reverse. Is that what you said before?
Yeah,
We'll get into that, yeah.
yeah, that's the argument for, we
Yeah.
can get into that.
Richard, what's the magic number? Like, at what value does this become a tax increase? Because clearly, under some values, this will be a tax cut.
I would, so if you, it's with a homestead, if you did,
The
under-
second option, that's.
yeah, I'm just gonna back up. Under option A, the only people paying more in tax are those with homes above $2 million. Everyone else is left with nothing, but everyone over 2 million pays. With the second option, where you're raising the rate, but also raising the homestead deduction, kind of to jump back in some other conversations about all the levers in the property tax, it would be hard to say that there's a single rate, because given how much other stuff is changing, whether you're eligible for other tax relief options. But my thought or my intuition is that we put it at that line, that it would roughly hit around 2 million in value, 1.5 million.
Okay, so it's not.
So if you own a home worth 1.5 million is when you would begin to start to see some increase. Although under that proposal, you would also see lots of households with lower valuable homes getting tax cuts. Under A, no one gets a tax cut, some people get a tax increase. Under B, some people get a tax increase, but some households will also see a tax cut.
So it's a shift towards more single-family homes, because most condos will be under that value. And it's going to be a shift towards higher value neighborhoods.
It would definitely be going to higher value homes. I don't know the answer to the other part.
So to the
Okay, so now,
40% thing, 80%.
any others on this,
taxes,
because I want to get all the commissioners' comments, and we want to leave by 4, so you've got 5 minutes to do the rest.
Well, that's easy, because I already did number 29, if you missed it. 29 is the phase out of itemized deductions. It would just be quicker, so you would lose the itemized quicker, you would pay more if you're in that band. Number 30 is to increase the cigarette tax from $4.50 per pack to $5.50 per pack. And then with that, I'm going to step off, because there are more proposals. There are roughly 10 more proposals. They all have to do with simplifying the tax system. To respect your time, I do not know enough about these to answer your questions. Nick does, and he can address them. But what's notable about all these is they have no revenue score. So whether it's a good idea, a bad idea, or somewhere in between, we can discuss it at a later meeting and hash it out, but it won't affect the overall cost of the package and the trade-offs that you have to consider with these other proposals.
So now, in order for us to catalog and properly prepare for our subsequent meeting, hopefully it's a meeting or meetings, but whatever. If you could now comment on your reaction to, again, as a starting point, this chairman's mark, your reaction in general, and most importantly, where you take exception so we can canvass that and keep track of that. And I'll start on my right with Gregory.
Oh, gosh. Okay, I'm probably gonna be the easiest person, and I'll just go farther. I can accept this as is. I like this package. I see every single one of us actually reflected in one or more of these things. It presents to me a lot of moderation and compromise. And I like the fact especially that we're looking at keeping middle income and lower income families protected. I like the business relief. I particularly like the business activity tax with all of its warts, because I think it is going to be turned into relief to businesses that we want to target. And a couple of broad things I think that are worth getting out at the beginning. I think we need to have, maybe if we can, a common understanding of whether or not we're supposed to account for the political difficulty of elected officials implementing one or more of these. I'm attacking this as though I'm happy to punt that problem to the elected officials. This is our best assessment of what they ought to do. Whether or not the politics of that are hard or easy is not something that I'm taking into account now. The same thing with worries of litigation. If governments were always afraid of being sued, they would never get anything done. And so I think asking the question and getting a response is part of the process. So I don't think we should be intimidated by the prospect of litigation. And similarly, with the CFO implementation, I think he's probably going to say at some point that one or more of these things are going to be difficult to implement. It's not quite clear how they will be implemented, and if they are implemented, it would have to happen over a course of years, and the fiscal impact would probably be incremental. That's okay. That's a fiscal impact thing that the council and the mayor and the CFO can worry about when they adopt the budget. I think our goal here is to put forth a policy, whether it's easy or whether it's implemented in 1 year or 10 years, is something that's not ours to necessarily think about.
Thank you, Gregory. Jim?
Briefly, a question, revenue neutral, whether we found by a revenue neutral.
No, you can object to revenue neutrality. You can object to whatever you want.
Okay, that's what I'm doing. Okay. The other thing is, on some of the first section, question the individual impact. I mean, we're raising X amount of money, cutting 77,1384. How much are we talking about on an individual basis to get there? The other, when we get down to the child refundable tax credit, how does that fit in within the baby bond proposal that law at the council now? 3, at the 529, some places you get the full credit for whatever you put in, as opposed to limited physical up into 4,000. The business activity tax, I'm not too sure. The implementation of that, and how do we do that? And then, of course, the residential property tax. I'm opposed to increase the residential property tax if at the time we're going to cut commercial taxes.
So just to be clear, Jim, you're saying, when you say object to the revenue neutrality provision, you're saying that we ought to be recommending that we reduce taxes or that we ought to increase taxes?
No, it's not, neither, that proposal doesn't have to end up revenue neutral.
I got you, okay. Jody?
I will address that. I am not convinced the recommendations need to be revenue neutral, and in fact, I think they need to incentivize jobs, incentivize businesses to stay in the city. I think the 20% of the residents who are paying 80% of the taxes, we certainly want them to stay in the city. I think this does not acknowledge the fact that you can move across this bridge in 15 minutes and enhance your life. Keep your friends exactly the way they are, and in truth, right now, enhance your life. So I think this thing does not make sense to me. It's a good question about the baby bonds. That's a clarifying question, how the child tax credit plays with the baby bonds. I would like to understand that. I am generally, the discussion on the BAT was helpful. I think I'm generally, I worry that the BAT will further incentive remote workers and relocation, so I'd really like to understand that. I think that is working the opposite direction of everything we need to do in this city. If we don't believe in a 15-minute to 20-minute city, we are crazy. So if people can have a great life and live in Virginia, they are going to work in Virginia, unless they're mandated to come down here. So I think we need to think about that, about what further disincentivized to hire. So I want to make sure that I am fully understanding the BAT. I want to make sure I understand it as it relates to startup, because I think we need to have a startup mentality, job creation in the city. Low margin firms, I think that's important. I deal in retail, I deal in grocery stores, those are the lowest of all margins. So the whole BAT thing was very unsettling to me. And then I think the other question is the 1.4%. I want to be sure too, I didn't understand where we got that. I know we've had discussions about New Hampshire, it was significantly less. So those are things I walk in here opposed to, but I think we need to have a lot of discussion about that. This package for me was dead on arrival because there was no incentive for jobs. I hope I'm not catching you, Mayor, off guard. But as soon as I open this, for me, I would just say it was dead on arrival. It is with no incentives for new jobs here. I'm going to hurt my own personal interest here in that I don't think cutting commercial properties and incentivizing the residential is the answer. I think that just needs more work to really understand that. I think we're going to have a huge devaluation in commercial real. We've already had a huge devaluation of commercial real estate. Just by interest rates going up, the values have dropped at 20% without even rolling through occupancy, et cetera. So I think we need to understand that, but I certainly want to keep as many people living in this city. And then the one that just scratches my head that's worth $26 million is, I'm sorry, Mayor, is an expensive trip on the way to camp, and I've gotten those tickets myself, but I don't understand why we extend it from 30 to 60 days at a $26 million. I just don't, I lack understanding there. So
can I ask a clarifying question of your criticism? So wouldn't 1 to 6 constitute economic incentives or not?
I don't know, perhaps some, but I don't think it really helps us. I think it doesn't help us say, how are we going to create new job formation here? And I think we really need to think about new job formation in this city.
Yeah, not just, yeah, I got you, okay.
I think the people who are here, this to me helps us say people who are here, how do we stop them from going to Virginia or Maryland? and I think this starts to think about that, but how do we also create new jobs here? It is, anyway.
Thank you, Jody. Yes, sir.
Thank you. There's a feature of this package that I really like, which is paying for business tax reductions with a business tax increase that actually broadens the base. Like the connectivity of those things. And everything else in the package, even the more progressive things that we're doing, some of them are pretty broad-based. For example, indexing income tax brackets to inflation. It pretty much benefits everybody. It's a tax reduction to anyone who pays income taxes. So I'm going to keep my comments largely on the business side of things. I do agree with Jody that this increase from 30 to 60 days, it will help households with cash flow problems, but it will also help unorganized, disorganized people like me who cannot get their act together. I wonder if there's a way to really differentiate between those two things. Let me go back to the business side of things and share a few things that are on my mind. There's something very attractive to me if we were able to say, if you come to DC, you're not going to pay personal property taxes, you're not going to pay corporate unincorporated business taxes, you're not going to pay license fees, you just have this one thing bad. In fact, I would love this to be extended so that we also eliminate the corporate income taxes and really send a strong message. That would be very appealing to me, and I know that ORA is doing some work scoring this. I would like to explore this some more. I do agree with Jody that the 10-cent decline in the commercial property taxes may not be the fix to what the commercial property is experiencing right now. I think the real fix for that is getting people into those offices so the values can start climbing up again. So a few things, I was very pleased to see that Nick included tax incentives in this package. For example, right now a 10-cent reduction gives us $97 million. Can we do a 7-cent reduction and put $30 million in incentives? I don't even think that we need to discuss what those incentives are, but just charge them to use them. That would be appealing to me. I do share with Jody the concern of this affecting startups, especially startups that raise a lot of venture capital. They have no profits. Will that make Virginia more attractive to them? And I think one important piece of information that can help us understand how firms experience these through ups and downs is to look at our own track record of gross receipts, because we've had this before. We have this already, to see if gross receipts default rates have increased over, during the pandemic or over periods of recession. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica.
Yeah, thanks. I overall think that this is a pretty strong proposal, and especially for, I think, the variety of opinions and perspectives around this table. I think it's a pretty valiant effort at finding something that we could all potentially get behind. I also am excited about the business activity tax and having something that really broadens our base and sort of shifts, the way that we are taxing, and partly because I think one of our goals here as a group is to think about like the long-term viability of our tax system, not just like how we deal with the problems of today, but like how are we setting ourselves up for a strong revenue system over time. And I think this is the part of the way to do that, is to broaden the base. And it does help to streamline other business taxes, and I would hope that that helped a lot of businesses feel like this was an easier place to do business. I'm also really excited about the child tax credit, the scheduled age expansion, and some of the things that are in here for families. I think if I were, so I think I could get behind what's in here, but I would like to see us think about shifting some of the corporate property tax cut and the cost of that to other things. Like I think we could, for example, boost the child tax credit for folks at the very bottom to try and take aim at child poverty. I think we could think about what's the trade-off. Do we shift some of those dollars to job creation tax credits if that's a strategy people want to explore? I'd also like to make sure that we're including folks who are undocumented in some of these tax credits, so making sure the child tax credit goes to folks who are filing with the individual
individual taxpayer identification number, like we do with our EITC currently. And just one little note is on the property tax, I would much prefer to see us go with option A, where we're creating a more progressive structure and only taxing value above a certain threshold at higher rates. So that's where I'm at.
Carolyn, yes. First of all, I was very surprised that we presented recommendations that were revenue neutral. However, I think that overall I could accept that. I was very, very pleased with the support for family recommendations, and I applaud us for that. However, I do understand that there are still some nuances and clarifications that we need to make around the support for families. The business activity tax, I was all for it. I'm still for it, but I think there's a little beating up we're going to have to do and go back and respond to some of the questions that were presented here and during the conversation today. But that was the one point that I thought we could kind of agree on. We talked about broadening the tax base, and there were so many issues that we had to deal with in terms of how to do that, that to me the solution could possibly be the business activity tax, but there's still some nuances. I agree with Jody and with Gresham that I don't think that we've done a great job with the job creation and incentives for new businesses, and particularly small businesses in the district. We're talking about revitalization and the comeback. I don't see anywhere. I mean, there are some tax breaks for smaller companies. I'm a small business, but they're small and then they're small because I pay a ballpark tax. So I don't think that we have put anything specific in this package that would say to people, hey, there are some opportunities for me to start a business, and there are some incentives. And we know we need to do a better job in terms of job creation. The property taxes, I got to go back and look at that again. I've got to kind of revisit that, so I'm not quite sure where I'm going to fall on the property tax issue. But overall, it's not too bad of a set of recommendations that I could support the majority of the issues.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. David?
I associate myself with Jody's remarks. This is dead on arrival as far as I'm concerned because of the business activity tax. I want to just set the table that, Gregory, I respect you, but I think it's naive for us to think the council is going to adopt the reductions in commercial property taxes or the reduction to the unincorporated income tax or any of these. I think what we're doing is we're feeling good about what we send over, and we're going to abandon our responsibility to give a good proposal, knowing these aren't going to happen. At the end of the day, what we're going to get is a $275 million tax increase, a la this business activity tax, and no commensurate reductions. If you can name me one member that's going to support reducing commercial property taxes by 10%, I'd like to know that person. There are zero who will. So what does a $275 million tax increase mean? It means increasing our corporate income taxes by 1/3. We currently collect around $850. We expect to collect $900. We're going to collect another $275 million with no guarantee. I think there will be no offsets or de minimis. So we're going to set the table for that. Now, what is this taxing? It's taxing labor. It is the opposite of what Jody has mentioned. And at the same time, it is relieving companies of the tax on capital. So think of the avalanche of automation that is in our future. As I can have an automated gate or an automated checker or an automated security guard, and I get to have all of that tax-free, but I'm now going to impose a tax on workers and tax them twice, once from the employer, and then once they take their pay home, we tax it again. So we are taxing workers, we're inviting automation, which might be a good thing, but we should all be prepared for what it means. The baseline of 1.4% is a factor of 2 what it is in New Hampshire. 2 of what it is in New Hampshire. Just so we're clear, we're taxing business activity. Now, if that's the case, who at this table will pay it? Most are nonprofits or exempt for-profits. This falls on for-profits, so it's easy to make a decision that doesn't impact you. But if we are going to start taxing...
I wish you wouldn't always personalize every goddamn thing.
Well, you know what? I wish I didn't have to.
Don't do that, David. Don't do it. You can make your points without personalizing it.
I am making my points. Allow me to make them the way I choose to.
Okay, go
And the
ahead.
fact of the matter is,
I hate that.
well, fine. The fact of the matter is, the truth is, if we're going to start taxing business activity without any respect for profit, so in our struggling corridors that don't make profits, we're going to expect them to pay 1.4%. Now, why are we doing this? We're going to start taxing business activity. Why are we not applying the same to nonprofits? For the privilege of being in the district. The whole notion, if you read that memo, for the privilege of doing business in the district, you will pay 1.4%, not one nickel from the nonprofits. I'm staring at one nonprofit with $500 million in accumulated assets in the district, $55 million in annual revenue, and a CEO that makes over $1 million a year. That's a nonprofit. But the corner beauty shop, whether she's making money or not, has got to come up with her 1.4%. Now, if that's fair, now look, I thought we used tax policy to privilege the things we want to encourage and burden the things we don't. This is a sin tax. It's taxing business activity. It's taxing what we want to encourage. As far as startups, Jody is absolutely right. This environment with these interest rates, it is impossible to raise money right now. Impossible. We have stacks against us, a deck stacked against us for being on the East Coast, not having a steady supply of venture capital. But then when you tell venture capitalists that to invest in the city, 1.4% of everything they get in venture capital, or what they give, is going to go to the government, you might as well hang it up. So let's be clear what we're doing. We are going to demonstrably increase the complexity of our tax system, as people will game it. We are going to tell our thriving legal and consulting practices that you should now take advantage of the lower, the generally favorable environment. As your leases come up, you should look to leave. I will remind the group that we now surpassed San Francisco as the most vulnerable commercial class space in the country because of the financial vulnerability of our Class A spaces and loans that are due. We're telling them to take this opportunity to go south and not apply it. I've heard about the stomach flu. You're irritated? Mayor, let me finish.
Let me ask you, can I just make a point of order? I get that, and I'm not criticizing your criticism of the VAT, but I know you have a suggestion on how we can pay for.
I do.
So will you get to that? Because it's a good suggestion.
This does not have to be revenue neutral.
Thank you.
The proposal can be subject to triggers. We did that in the Tax Parity Act. For revenue in excess of 5% every year, it would go to buy down some of these tax incentives that we want, all right? For instance, we did this, Glenn, before you were CFO. A 5% tax trigger under normal times allows the government to grow at twice the rate of inflation. Government ought to be able to meet its entry within twice the rate of inflation. Everything above that, we then prioritize which of these policy proposals go forward. It could be that we eliminate the basic business tax or whatever. We stagger them. Why am I confident that that will happen? Because I watched for 18 years the city's revenue. You watched it for a decade plus. Glenn, as much as we respect the CFO for being conservative, we were told last year that we would collect less money in 23 than we did in 22, and yet we collected more in 23 than we did in 22, albeit a little bit. The point is, this engine, especially with a higher performing stock market in this quarter, will produce income, I believe, that's going to exceed what we think. What's the problem with the recommendation that says if we have a 5%, everything above this comes into effect? That's my recommendation, that we trigger it. It just seems we've done it before. If we try to make this, my last point is, if we try to make this revenue neutral, then we've tied our hands behind our backs and we've abrogated our responsibility, which is to produce the best package. I'm willing to accept a lot of these things I'm not keen about. We abrogate our responsibility to say this is the structure of the system that allows us to compete and meet our other goals.
Thank you, David. I don't want to cut you off.
Sure.
I want to make sure that Rashad and Rahsaan get their points in. Go ahead.
So
Thank you, David.
I look at these through sort of three lenses, three criteria. One is an overall good policy, good tax policy that we're pursuing. Two, is the juice worth the squeeze? Meaning, if we do this, is the yield on revenue worth the effort of the proposal that's been made? And the third is its efficacy. Can this be implemented? I hear you, Gregory, that like that's not our issue, that's the council and administration's issue, but if we're going to recommend policy that we think should have a certain outcome, then we want to make sure that it can actually achieve that outcome. And so that's the things that I look at. I totally agree that we should think about what kind of directed incentives that we can offer that would help support job creation where we want to see those jobs created. Other than improving the general business climate and reducing taxes, how do we incentivize starts, new companies to locate here and hire people here? So I think that is a missing component in policy. With respect to the VAT tax, I have been open to it throughout the process. I'm still open to it. But I am concerned about a couple of things, and I want to think about what we set the tax at and what we have the threshold for payers if we're going to do a VAT tax to make sure that we don't de-incentivize new businesses and business starts if we apply it that way. I am concerned about the implementation and making sure, because frankly, if we talked about an activity tax that yielded $50 million, for example, I'd be less interested in it. So if we're going to make a bet on $275 million, I really expect us to be able to get it, to be able to do the things that we want to do. And so now I say 275, I'm less inclined at I'm less interested in the 1.4 tax and more interested in the lower number. But still, I think that was 175. So if we do it, we ought to expect that we can get that revenue, right? Otherwise, why go through the gnashing of the teeth and the pain of this discussion if we actually can't achieve that result? And so how this gets implemented is important, and particularly for that class of payers who aren't paying. If there is a way an easy way to get out of it, or if this will be tied in litigation such that we can't tax them, then I get back to my criteria. Having not been met, is the juice worth the squeeze and the efficacy of implementation? So those things need to be resolved for me in order to be able to support the VAT tax. The other thing that I'm most concerned about is the residential property tax increase, and I'm concerned about that because as a person who's moved here from lower cost areas, I know for sure that the value of your house doesn't equate to your financial means. It's just the value of your house because you chose to live in DC. And in a time where we've got so many things happening in our city, where we want to retain people to stay here, we ought not tax the people who have choice to be elsewhere. We ought not incentivize them to be elsewhere because they have choice by increasing their taxes because their house is expensive. And I think we have to be very careful about what that sends to that residential taxpayer. And so I'm most against the residential tax increase. I think we've got some issues to resolve on the bat, and I think we need to have an incentive. If that means we're not balanced in terms of the package, then I can live with that. I think that's a good idea. That's where I lean towards. And if we end up going down the triggers path, I am open to that. It's not my preference. And I say that coming from the administration. I think you gotta be really careful if you're gonna handcuff the ability of the administration to make investments and set the budget and set spending plans with predetermined triggers. But I'm open to the discussion.
Thank you, Rashad. And finally, Mr.
Yeah, I won't pontificate. I think the comments are on the table. I have varying touch points. I'll start by reminding kind of my first question when we started out on this journey after you've been given the mandate, and we don't have a number to tie it to is what is the impact let me go back. There are no context-free zones, right? So we are in a context where we're given a mandate. In this context, we have public safety issues that are causing our city to reel. We just came out of a pandemic. we're balancing racial equity, attracting new businesses, facilitating better tax administration. From where I sit, the cacophony that was the discussions of the last 18 months or so have somewhat become a little bit more harmonious for me. And not that I'm thrilled and excited about this package, but it at least codifies, I think, the ideas that we've all brought to the table. I agree that there should be more to attract businesses and spur new opportunities. I live in a place where our workforce center is looking for people to get new ideas and start new businesses that are in Ward 8. We want young people to see that they can thrive and start their own businesses and grow it. So I think that I'm in agreement with the proposals that are here for the folks who are already here with businesses, that it signals to them that we're thinking about them, but it's not attractive enough, as Jody mentioned, to really, get people really enthusiastic about coming to do business here. The work around supporting families, I can stomach that. I agree with Erica. I think we were thoughtful in adding the earned income tax credits, and I think that piece, not very robust, but robust enough to at least appease, or make it palatable for me. To the business and activity tax, I thought that was something that we could all agree on, and that we were getting someplace. And clearly, I'm disillusioned by that. More.
A couple wheels came off.
Yeah. So more work needs to be done around like fleshing that out and getting answers and thinking through that. But I really thought that there was something there. The last thing I will say, which may be an anathema for most people hearing it from me, but I do believe if we're going to broaden the tax base, I run a nonprofit. And I do agree, large nonprofits who are in the city are not afforded to participate in this, and they should. And yes, it may be hard to actually figure that out, but I believe if we're truly going to do that, and we're truly going to look at all parties being involved, I think nonprofits should also be looked at. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Just a point of clarification, if I could.
Yeah, sure.
The New York State Legislature has a proposal. It's actually a viable proposal and may well pass, that nonprofits above a certain, because it's, a nonprofit FASB above a certain level of activity will pay income taxes. So like New York, Columbia Presbyterian, Columbia would pay taxes. So there is some precedent.
Jody, if you mind, just real quick. Just as we are trying to assign tax privilege based on where activity goes, we have, I think, 2 types of nonprofits in the city. We have those that are providing services in the city, and then we have those national ones. And I think that, not to suggest that they don't provide value, but they are different, okay? And so, if a BAT were to apply, couldn't we have some, just as if it's easy to do for law firms, why can't we do the same strategy for nonprofits about where the focus of their work is? And for those that, like AARP, not to name any, they got on my bad side by sending me an invitation to join. Many of you may have got it too. I almost took it back in person, but I neglected to. But the point is, there are different types of nonprofits, Mayor, with different focus. And if we can figure that out, that is interesting to me. Because we've folks been here for decades.
But the point I would go ahead, you have a point there, go ahead.
I just want to clarify one thing that I might be misunderstood. I want to be clear, Richard, as you're taking notes. I think we need to expand our base, not broaden our base, and that I learned the difference going through this, and I think we have missed the mark on expanding the base.
Yes.
Sorry.
Is there anything in particular that may have been discussed or that you might personally advocate for?
I think job incentives, bringing companies, bringing business here, bringing residents into the city, making this, there's
But through economic growth, bringing in more people, not changing the law.
Which is a good segue. What we want to do this week is to have conversations with you to articulate and elaborate the points that you've made so that we can get them organized and present them, put their best foot forward, present them for deliberation at our next meeting. Does that make sense? So be in touch with each of you. Everybody feel free to lobby one another if you wish. Yeah, Jim, do you have a point?
No, just a couple of things. On the business license, repeal and personal property tax. How much on an individual basis is this applicable? See, it's fine to say you're gonna repeal the tax, but with $50 on the individual, that won't make a difference. So I'd like to know what's the probable impact individually on the business. So when we consider this, it makes sense. I don't want,
Which one is this?
number 1, 2, and
Okay.
3, yeah.
That's,
Other thing is, the child tax. The baby bonds seem to incentivize what you want to have. It's for either college, a house, or a job. But if you just provide the income, tax credits, you move away from an incentive. I would prefer to move towards an incentive.
Just one comment. So I think in terms of political liability, another point to consider is, since we're not the federal government and we can't run a deficit, handing the council a package that's deficit producing in a year that we're already budget strained and the metro tax still has to be reckoned, seems like it's not very helpful.
Gregory, I'm sorry, I wasn't intending to submit something that's deficit inducing.
Well, if it's not budget neutral, then it's deficit. I mean, unless we're gonna raise money, but.
No, but he's saying this would be over a period of years taken from new revenue.
Right, I get that, but the whole concept of budget neutrality, I'm assuming nobody's thinking it's gonna be a budget positive thing. So if we're cutting taxes, that's great, but if it creates a hole in the budget, it's not helpful for the council and the mayor to.
And we're not trying to do that, Gregory. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying that the trigger for these things to take effect happen if revenue exceeds 5%, which allows the mayor to double spending of inflation and also then gives money back to taxpayers if they've overpaid. That's it. I don't want to deficit.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
I did great on this. I know that's the way to do it.